Alright, so welcome to this next video. We're going to be basically talking about a few ksTaT features, render tips, and just tips in general, like just little tiny things that we can use to make our lives better. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was clarify when we were talking about the clown mask and how important it is when you're rendering. And again, you can find the clown mask here under Output, Clown, and it'll output a file that looks like this. And so what we'll do is we're going to go into Photoshop and we're going to do a color range selection. Okay, so we're going to take this and select the black. You'll see that the white is what we're selecting. So to isolate the gun, you'll see that it has the background selected. So we Control-Shift-I, Control-C, Control-V. Now we have a mask that we can, Control-Select of the gun. We can take this, Control-V, Control-C, and now we have the gun and the background on a separate layer, because we talked about earlier having these ground reflections in AO are on their own layer or on the alpha channel of the render. So using the clown mask we can get rid of it. Inversely, we can find a different part of the gun, say the stock, and we can do the same thing, control click it and use it as a mask. So like let's say we wanted to just affect the levels on this thing. With that control selection, we can just affect the levels on just the plastic materials. And it makes our lives a lot easier, especially when we're working with something that has been rendered with a background or reflections in it. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is optimizing your samples. So you'll notice that we have this metal material here, and this metal material is actually going to be very rough, and so it needs a lot of samples. Typically this is set to around 9 or 10 or something like that. And so when our scene and we render it is 32 samples or 24 or 16 samples, normally this would be that same amount of samples. So what we do is we can just up the samples on certain materials individually, and that way they're still going to be rendering with a high sample count without slowing down the overall render. So I think that's really important if you want to get renders done quickly. I also wanted to go over the idea of using region renders, because you don't always need to render your whole image if you're working on, say, textures of some object. And so if you just do a region render, it's going to just render this area of the image, allowing you to reach the end result much quicker. You could also use a color ID mask and maybe hide some of the things that you don't want to render. You can right click here, hide part. And by doing this, let's say that you only wanted to render the metal, you could render the metal and then comp it in over this and make your render time even faster if you just needed to make a quick change. Alright, one other quick tip that I use all the time is when I'm working, I always like to turn my CPU cores down so I can have the background and any other things that I'm doing being a little bit better. Typically I have way more cores, but I'm on a laptop at the moment. So right now I'm only going to let it use 10 cores, and that way my CPU usage won't be always 100 and the other programs can run. So here's another really awesome tip, is this performance mode. I've already talked about it in the introductory video, but I wanted to give a practical example of how it's useful. If we had a carbon fiber texture, and the texture doesn't matter, you'll notice that when you're solving in the regular mode, it's much slower, and especially if you're working on a small scale, like say here, it can take a while to preview the strength of your bump, especially if it's something more subtle like plastic. But when you're in performance mode, you're actually able to see the scale, the depth, and the strength of the bump map much easier and more clearly, especially if it's subtle, without waiting for it to render and doing a render or doing something. So just click performance mode to preview and test your bumps. I find that that can be really helpful when you're trying to quickly make materials. Another very useful feature is the save package feature. because Save Package will bundle up all of the materials as well as any assets that are related to this image, allowing you to send it to someone else. So that way they don't have to have the same textures and file paths as you. You can send someone the entire package. So that's what I've done here. You just type whatever you want and you hit save. Alright, let's go and talk about the geometry view very quickly. So we go over here to Window, or we press O, and we can go to the geometry view. This will allow us to preview our geometry, as well as change how it's viewed. I have a matte cap on at the moment. You can do shaded as well, but matte cap seems to look the best to me. Additionally, you can edit geometry if you would like. We're not going to do it, but we can close a mesh, edit normals, split into separate objects, etc. If you need this, check it out. If not, don't ever use it. Alright, two other things that we're going to talk about are animation, and then also another small tip. You can do this in post for sure, but ksTaT has a very harsh look to it, and sometimes, not all the time, I like to add this bloom effect, just a very small amount. It's so unnoticeable that you probably can't even see it in the video, but it softens everything up just a small bit, and sometimes that can make a difference. Another thing is the turntable, and we're just going to make a quick turntable. So let's say you want to do an animation. You go over here to the animation tab. It's very simple. We click the animation wizard, turntable. We want to animate the camera, not the object. And you can see all the different effects that you can do. So let's just do orbit. We're going to hit next, add a camera. Actually, we're going to delete that camera. We want a better camera. So we're going to do this, add a camera. Cool. Next, you can pick your settings, hit finish, and press play. It's as easy as that. And then you just have to make sure it's not clipping off the screen. You can adjust your camera, get it how you want it. And then now that we have this, we go to the render tab, animation, and we can output the amount of frames that we need. We can output a video, or we can output the frames and comp them together in After Effects and turn it into a GIF or whatever else we want. It's up to you. So these are just some quick tips for ksTaT and some small things that you can use to get what you want. Hopefully this video was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next chapters, which are going to be covering lighting theory and a bit more of the artistic side of things than just tools. So I'll see you.